back among her pack. Each time she returned to Crescent territory, she relived the pain of seeing her parents brutally murdered. Every moment she was there, the darkness of those days where she'd been held captive and repeatedly tortured crept further out of her subconscious and tried to overtake her. She was still a Crescent wolf, and, as a DeLuca, a princess of the pack her family had ruled for generations, but it hurt too much to spend time there, so she stayed away as much as she could. She had done her best to split her time between her two older siblings and their packs until she came of age, but as soon as she'd turned 18, she'd told them both that she was moving out and getting her own place. The constant back and forth had left her wolf confused about where they belonged, and her family ties to both packs didn't help matters any. Having her own space separate from each territory had helped to settle her, but even years later her wolf demanded she return to Crescent territory on full moons. She'd found it helped soothe her animal side if she went back regularly, but if her wolf had started to need the reassurance of home more often, then she wasn't sure what she would do. For a long time now, she had considered the possibility of leaving the Crescent pack entirely. She had ties to the Moray pack now that Luna was queen. Her wolf could find a home amongst them. She was sure of it. But whenever she thought about cutting ties to her pack and starting over, she couldn't help but think of her father and mother, of the way it would have broke their hearts to see her abandon all they'd worked for and created. She always ended up imagining the hurt and betrayal on Leo's face, and decided to leave the decision for another time, rather than upset the carefully balanced house of cards that her family had managed for years. She knew she would have to make a decision someday, but she didn't like the idea of anyone forcing her into it, especially not her own wolf. "Well, well, what do we have here?" Maya had been so lost in her thoughts that she'd forgotten to pay attention to her surroundings, and the voice caught her off guard. She glanced up and immediately frowned. There were two men in her path, and considering they were standing outside of Hyde's pub, she could only assume they were drunk and looking for trouble. Her wolf gave a low growl, more than happy to serve them up with a double helping, but Maya took a deep breath and tried to remain calm. "What's a beautiful girl like you doing walking alone in the middle of the night?" The second man sneered at her, as the first looked her up and down lasciviously. "I'm going home," she spoke evenly. "If you'll excuse me." They didn't move, and some part of Maya had known that they wouldn't. Her jaw clenched. She didn't recognize them, and the fact that they didn't recognize her told her all that she needed to know about them. They weren't locals. Everyone in Noir, Louisiana, knew who Maya DeLuca was. Either they knew her as a princess of the Crescent pack or as the younger sister of the Moray pack, Queen. If these two didn't know her on sight, then they weren't from around here. More than that, though, she could sense magic on them. Yet she didn't scent another wolf. They weren't wolf shifters, but they weren't human either. She couldn't be entirely sure what species they were, and she didn't like that any more than she liked the way they were looking at her. They were young, probably barely legal, and had either been tossed out of Hyde's or come out for some air in a futile attempt to sober up. They couldn't hold their alcohol, and they were just drunk enough and dumb enough to think they had the upper hand because there were two of them and only one of her. They were wrong. Maya knew what they saw when they looked at her. Just a girl, young and alone, weak and helpless. What they didn't see, what they couldn't see, was that Maya's days of being powerless were long since past. She knew what it was like to be too young and too weak to defend herself. When she'd been taken hostage, she had fought with every bit of strength she had, but it hadn't been enough. She hadn't been strong enough to save herself or her sisters from the monsters that tormented and tortured them. She'd had to rely on someone else to save her, and she had vowed to never need a man to keep her safe ever again. She was strong now. She'd spent years training with pack enforcers. She could take care of herself. She might be a princess, but she didn't.